Well, good morning, Tom. I think that, broadly speaking, this president is really upset that Jay Powell will not cut rates, obviously. And he is trying to influence the Fed board any way that he can. I think he is frustrated with the structure of the Fed board, where there are staggered terms, as we all know, these 14-year terms,
right,
which are intended to outlive any one administration.
And one president. But let me cut to the chase. You're expert on this. And this is what everybody's asking, whether they're for or against Ms. Cook. Where's the legislative branch on this? Where's the House? And particularly, where's a Phil Gramm-like Senate?
Well, so that is, I think, the big point, is that this is in many ways self-defeating for the president. Because, of course, not only does this potentially not have the impact on the yield curve that he wants to see and mortgage rates and what have you, but it also makes the confirmation of any future nominee that much more difficult. Right. Remember that in order to get confirmed, a nominee needs 50 votes in the Senate. Republicans right now have 53. However, this is something that you all appreciate this nuance, but lots of financial press do not. The Senate Banking Committee, which is the first step to confirmation, any nominee cannot lose one Republican, assuming Democrats vote against that person. So that means that by doing this, the president has focused attention on that confirmation process, and in my view, makes it a lot more difficult for him to get anybody who has any whiff of partisanship or any whiff of being able to be influenced by the president in terms of monetary policy. So again, sort of self-defeating maybe for the market's perspective in the short term, from a rates perspective in the short term.
Damian, jump in here.
Yeah, I mean, Tom, it's really funny. We only get Libby when summer recess is going on and the Senate and the Congress are out, and she actually can make her way up to New York. But Libby, I got to ask you this. Forget about Fed credibility for a minute. Let's talk about Intel. The U.S. government is making an $8.9 billion investment in Intel. Is that just the first of other investments that this government's going to be making in the private sector?
Yeah, again, and to bring Congress into this, in order for the president, the executive branch, to make an equity investment in a company, you need congressional authorization. And the president is using the CHIPS Act funding, the majority of CHIPS Act funding for this investment. Right. In that bill, sorry to get all, propeller head on you, but in that bill, there is no actual authorization for an equity investment. So I think there's a question about the legality of this particular investment. Okay. However, going forward, you would absolutely need Congress to authorize. And so, no, I do not think it's a trend.
Peter Scheer's coming in Thursday and Friday. We want you to come in Thursday and Friday as well. I got to get back to Dr. Cook, who frankly, I adore. Everybody knows how wonderfully close I am to Eichen Green. This is one of his great students at Berkeley. She's being run over the coals. Where is the senator from Idaho? I've been in his office. Crapo has potatoes lined up in his office. Where is Tim Scott of the Carolinas? Where are these senators just to have due process? For, against Trump? Due process. Where is it, Libby?
Yeah, and I would also add to that list, where is Senator Rounds? Where is Senator Tillis? Where is Senator McCormick? I mean, these folks who you just highlighted are all on the Senate Banking Committee, Senator Tim Scott, of course, being the chair of the Senate Banking Committee. And again, this may sort of seem like, kind of wonky talk, but this is very important because this will be the first step for any nominee for the Fed. And again, by focusing the attention, the public's attention on the credibility of the Fed, on the independence of the Fed, he's just raised the stakes and raised the bar in terms of, I think, again, getting his own nominee confirmed. And I would say Stephen Myron as well, who he wants to get in place by the September meeting. This makes it a lot more difficult. That was always going to be very difficult anyway, but this makes it even harder to do.
Okay, I got to go to the Supreme Court. Damian wants to jump in here. Folks, Libby Cantrill with us with Pimco here with real expertise on Washington. If it goes, and I'm speaking as a hack, to the Supreme Court, do you see evidence that the Trump-appointed justices will look at due process and tell their guy, no, you can't do that?
Well, they've already made a special case for the Fed, right? They've already, in their footnotes, in their recent judgments around firing other chairmen of independent agencies, they've already basically carved out and said that the Fed is a special case and that the threshold for firing the chairman or a governor for the Fed is going to be different from firing somebody at the FTC, for example, which is another independent agency. So, who knows? I'm not a lawyer, although sometimes I do like to play one on TV or radio.
No,
but
David,
I am not. But
right.
I think your point is a good one. That this could very well be adjudicated by the Supreme Court. And the last thing, Tom, I'll say this is I think this is by design. I think the president is fine challenging all of these norms because some of it will stick and some of it has stick, and thereby he expands executive power in the process.